On our 7th wedding anniversary, the junior my wife had secretly admired for 5 years lost his sanity and drove his car straight into me. Liu Ryan, who had always sworn that I was her only love, took advantage of my coma to privately sign a letter of forgiveness, deciding not to pursue any responsibility for Changxing. When I woke up, Liu Ryan, with a helpless expression, explained to me, Xingwen just made a foolish mistake in the moment. She added, we can't let this incident ruin his entire life. She paused for a moment, then added another line. He was just too infatuated. Looking at Liu Ryan's calm exterior, though unable to hide the heartache beneath it, I understood deep down that this marriage was already nearing its end. And what if I insist on holding him accountable? I asked, my face expressionless as I looked at Liu Ryan. Her gaze was disapproving as she looked back at me. Jiwen, you're a lawyer, she began. And you know how cruel it is for a young person just entering society to have a criminal record. Don't you lawyers often say that the law shouldn't be devoid of humanity? Shang Xingwen already knows he was wrong. He suffered so much because of this incident. Hasn't he received enough of a lesson? I stared at Liu Ryan, who was defending another man so aggressively, an unspeakable bitterness welling up inside me. Liu Ryan realized her tone was harsh and immediately fell silent. I didn't rush to ease the tension for her as I had done in the past. Instead, I simply looked at her indifferently. For a long moment, there was silence. Liu Ryan started explaining, saying she just couldn't bear to watch a young person ruin their future. She told me not to overthink it. I chuckled softly, but said nothing. Liu Ryan, unsettled by my lack of response, nervously kept quiet for a week. Honey, before Liu Ryan could finish, the nurse suddenly pushed open the door, saying anxiously, Dr. Liu, the patient you brought in yesterday has woken up and is making a scene, demanding ... Liu Ryan's expression changed immediately. She muttered, I'll go check, then left without looking back. This wasn't the first time Chang Xingwen pulled such stunts. I had never taken them seriously before, but I didn't expect Liu Ryan to be swayed by him. Not long after, a notification popped up on my phone. It was an update from Chang Xingwen's social media. She says she doesn't care about me, but her actions show otherwise. The attached photo was of Liu Ryan, visibly worried, examining him. I scrolled up, finding many similar updates. Almost every post included pictures of Liu Ryan. It turned out that, without my noticing, they had shared so many interactions. In fact, during several moments when Liu Ryan told me she was working overtime at the hospital, I now realized that her so-called overtime was often spent with Chang Xingwen. From his posts on social media, I could clearly trace the progress of their relationship. In the middle of the night, unable to sleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I got up and walked to the window. The moment I looked outside, my gaze froze on two figures not far below. Senior, you do have feelings for me. Otherwise, why would you care so much about me? Chang Xingwen looked excitedly at Liu Ryan, who appeared indifferent. I'm just being compassionate, she replied. But Chang Xingwen interrupted her. Senior, stop lying to yourself. I don't mind, as long as I can be with you. I don't need a title. A fleeting trace of emotion crossed Liu Ryan's face. Chang Xingwen clearly noticed her change in expression and suddenly raised his hand to cup her face, kissing her. Liu Ryan's hands lifted, then dropped, repeating the motion several times before she finally resigned and embraced him back. Watching the two passionately kiss in the dark of the night, I couldn't help but let out a self-deprecating laugh. As I stood there for a long while, a passerby made a noise. Liu Ryan seemed to suddenly snap back to her senses and pushed Chang Xingwen away forcefully. Caught off guard, he fell to the ground. Yet he was elated, sitting on the ground and laughing joyfully. Liu Ryan muttered lunatic under her breath and turned to leave. I chuckled again. lowered my head, sent a message, and returned to bed. Soon, the recipient replied with a single line. Is that true? The next moment, my phone rang. Just as I was about to answer, Liu Ryan pushed the door open and entered. I quickly pressed the decline button on the call. Liu Ryan noticed that the window in my room overlooked the spot where she had just kissed Chang Xingwen. A trace of panic flashed across her face, but she quickly composed herself and cautiously asked, Honey, why aren't you asleep yet? When I heard her call me that, I immediately came to a realization. Liu Ryan only used honey when she was either guilty or needed a favor. I didn't answer her. Instead, calmly asking about Chang Xingwen's condition, Liu Ryan froze for a moment, then finally said, It's nothing. He's just throwing a childish tantrum. As his attending physician, I couldn't ignore it. As soon as she finished her sentence, she seemed to realize she had misspoken. Chang Xingwen hit his head. She added, There's no need to explain. I interrupted, my tone indifferent. I don't care. Liu Ryan fell silent, her brow slightly furrowed. What do you mean you don't care? What could possibly happen between me and Chang Xingwen? I hate clingy people the most. Seeing how unusually agitated she was, I chuckled softly. You hate him the most. So how could you possibly have any involvement with him, right? Liu Ryan's face stiffened, but she replied, That's right. At that moment, she pointed at my phone, which had been vibrating continuously. Who's calling you in the middle of the night? I glanced at it, then replied nonchalantly, Spam call. But Liu Ryan didn't believe me and reached out to grab my phone, but I raised my hand to block her. Her brows furrowed tightly, and her tone grew displeased. Are you hiding something from me? I replied calmly, I'm a lawyer. My phone contains a lot of other people's private information. Liu Ryan opened her mouth, but couldn't say a word. I didn't look at her again, instead walking out with my phone in hand. As soon as I answered the call, an excited female voice came through the receiver. Jiwen, are you really agreeing to be the legal advisor for my company? Have you divorced Liu Ryan? Are you willing to be with me? Su Wenyu's thrilled voice made my ears buzz. A long time ago, Su Wenyu had invited me to join the Su Corporation as a legal advisor. But out of consideration for Liu Ryan, I had declined. After multiple invitations, I told her, only if I divorce Liu Ryan will I consider becoming a legal advisor for the Su Corporation. At that time, Su Wenyu laughed and said, Nonsense. Everyone knows how loving you and Liu Ryan are. After all, Liu Ryan had given up her family inheritance for me, choosing instead to work as an ordinary doctor at a hospital. But even I hadn't expected Liu Ryan to change her heart. Snapping out of my thoughts as Su Wenyu kept calling my name, I responded, Yes, I'm preparing
My
for a
word
divorce.
surprisingly
calmed Su
She
Wenyu
asked
down.
blank,
Did something happen? I answered calmly, I'll tell you when there's a chance. A week passed. A week later, I'll come to see you. At that moment, Liu Ryan walked out of the hospital room, just in time to hear this sentence. She asked curiously, Who are you meeting in a week? I told Su Wenyu, let's hang up for now, and then turned to Liu Ryan. It's a client we've scheduled to meet in a week. Liu Ryan didn't think much of it. She reached out, wrapped her arms around my waist, and in a soft tone said, Jiwen, I was too anxious this afternoon. I signed the letter of forgiveness because I didn't want to owe Chang Xingwen so much. Can you understand that? After hearing her explanation, I believed that her initial intention was indeed like that. But perhaps even she didn't realize. Her heart had already drifted away from me. I smiled lightly. I understand. I'm tired. I'll go rest now. Hearing my response, Liu Ryan quickly urged me to go rest. It's my fault. Patients need more rest. And I even argued with you over trivial things. Looking at the genuine guilt on her face, I couldn't make sense of her actions today. Lowering my gaze, I hid the sorrow in my eyes. Just one more week, and everything would come to an end. During the 3 days I stayed in the hospital, Liu Ryan came to the room every evening after work to accompany me. On the surface, everything seemed no different from before. But I knew that in the dead of night, Liu Ryan would meet with Cheng Xingwen. This was clear from the daily updates on Cheng Xingwen's social media. I saw them go to the beach to Stargazi, travel across districts to eat barbecue, and even on the night Liu Ryan told me she was on an overnight shift, she went to a hotel with Cheng Xingwen. In a video Cheng Xingwen posted, I heard him repeatedly ask Liu Ryan if she had him in her heart. Just when I thought Liu Ryan wouldn't respond, I heard her softly murmur, "MM." With that single sound, my heart completely died. The next day, Liu Ryan came into my hospital room unusually early, carrying breakfast. I glanced at the name on the breakfast packaging. From a place over 10 kilometers away from the hospital. Coincidentally, it was near the hotel she went to with Cheng Xingwen yesterday. Why go so far just to buy breakfast? Her hand hesitated for a moment as she unpacked the breakfast. I didn't have much to do this morning, so I drove over there. You like this, don't you? You eat first. I have a meeting to attend in the department. Not long after Liu Ryan left, the hospital room door opened again. I looked up and saw Cheng Xingwen. My reaction was calmer than I had expected. Before he could say anything, I spoke first. Liu Ryan isn't here. Cheng Xingwen paused for a moment, his tone carrying a hint of smugness. I know Senior isn't here. I just came to return her coat. Returning a coat? I let out a cold laugh. If you were really returning her coat, why bring it here to me? I glanced at the coat in his hand, grabbed it and tossed it aside. I calmly said, "Thank you." Unwilling to back down, Cheng Xingwen asked, "Aren't you curious why her coat ended up with me?" I nonchalantly continued eating my breakfast. What can a coat prove? Ryan probably just tossed it to you without much thought. Cheng Xingwen glared at me, frustrated. Yesterday, Senior. Before he could finish, Liu Ryan suddenly pushed the door open. What are you doing here? The moment she saw Cheng Xingwen in the hospital room, her face froze. Senior, I just came to return your coat. Thanks for letting me borrow it yesterday. Liu Ryan looked at him with impatience. If there's nothing else, hurry up and leave. Hurt flashed in Cheng Xingwen's eyes as he glanced at her, before turning and leaving. As soon as the door closed, Liu Ryan hurriedly began explaining to me. Ji-Wen, don't listen to his nonsense. There's nothing between me and him. He didn't have any clothes when he was discharged yesterday, so I lent him one of mine. I didn't expect him to come here and make up stories. I finished the last bite of my breakfast before slowly replying. What did he even say? All he mentioned was returning the coat. Regret flashed in Liu Ryan's eyes, perhaps regretting that she had said too much, making her seem as though she was trying to cover something up. But all she could do was mumble, "Then that's fine." At that moment, Liu Ryan's phone rang. I saw the name flashing on the screen. Xingwen. Just that one name. Liu Ryan glanced at the phone and quickly said something urgent in the department before leaving, listening to her increasingly practice lies. I chuckled softly. I began drafting a divorce agreement for myself. When Liu Ryan returned that evening, her lips were slightly swollen. I glanced at her briefly before looking away. She, however, instinctively touched her lips. When her eyes landed on the divorce agreement on my screen, there was a brief moment of panic. Ji-Wen, aren't you a corporate lawyer? Why are you suddenly looking at a divorce agreement? I replied casually, preparing it for a friend. Liu Ryan seemed like she wanted to ask more, but her phone rang with the distinctive tone of her department. There's an emergency with a patient. I have to go. Watching her hurriedly leave, I lowered my head and continued working on my divorce agreement. The next day, as I completed my discharge procedures, Liu Ryan appeared in the hospital room looking exhausted. There were consecutive emergency cases in the department last night. I worked through the night. I didn't react as I usually would, asking after her well-being or offering words of comfort. Instead, I calmly said, "You've worked hard." My cold and distant attitude over the past few days seemed to annoy Liu Ryan. "Li Jiwen, what's gotten into you these past few days? It's just a forgiveness letter. Why can't you understand me?" I looked at her calmly without answering the question. "My firm has urgent matters to handle. I have something important to discuss with you tonight. Come home early." After saying that, I didn't wait for her response, picked up my things and left straight away. Back at the law firm, I printed a transfer document and went to see my partner. We had already discussed this beforehand. From now on, I would handle the Sue Corporation's affairs. After finalizing this matter, I took the divorce agreement and went home. But even by 10 p.m., there was no sign of Liu Ryan. I refreshed Weibo and saw that Chung Xingwen had posted an update just 10 minutes ago. In the photo, he and Liu Ryan were kissing under the stars. I glanced at the location tagged in the post. It was the same beach where I had proposed to Liu Ryan. With the divorce agreement in hand, I drove straight to the location. Before I got close, I could hear people cheering, "Say yes!" Among the voices egging them on, Liu Ryan slowly nodded her head. As the crowd dispersed, Chung Xingwen, beaming with happiness, held Liu Ryan's hand and began to walk back. The moment Liu Ryan looked up and saw me, the smile on her face disappeared completely. Her expression twisted in shock and fear. "Honey, why are you here?" The way I looked at Liu Ryan was colder than ever before. "I came to witness your love story." As Liu Ryan tried to say something, I handed her the divorce agreement and coldly said, "Liu Ryan, let's get divorced." Liu Ryan's pupils dilated instantly at my words. "Jiwen, you're joking, right?" "I was just joking around with Chung Xingwen," Liu Ryan stammered. There were so many people. Rejecting him would have been awkward. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "You're joking with me too, right?" I extended the divorce agreement in my hand a little further toward her. With a serious look in my eyes, "Do I look like I'm joking with you?" Tears began to well up in Liu Ryan's eyes. "Honey, you have to believe me. There's nothing between me and Chung Xingwen. He's the one who's been relentlessly pestering me." Each of her words sounded heartfelt and sincere. If I hadn't seen Chung Xingwen's Weibo posts, I might have actually believed her. I glanced at Chung Xingwen, who stood pale behind her, and let out a mocking laugh. "Your little boyfriend looks like he's about to crumble. Are you sure you don't want to check on him?" A flicker of hesitation crossed Liu Ryan's face, but she quickly steeled herself and said, "Stop talking nonsense. I only agreed to him to save face. I won't have any more contact with him from now on. I'll delete him right now," she added, taking out her phone and preparing to block all of Chung Xingwen's contact information. Chung Xingwen, looking devastated, grabbed Liu Ryan's hand. "Senior, I won't bother you anymore. But can you please?" Liu Ryan impatiently pushed him away. "This is all your fault. You made Jiwen misunderstand me. Don't ever show up in front of me again." Watching their little performance, a mocking smile played at the corners of my lips. Chung Xingwen looked heartbroken as he stared at her. Liu Ryan, steeling herself, grabbed my hand and tried to walk away with me. Chung Xingwen's eyes were filled with unwillingness and malice. After Liu Ryan pulled me far enough away, I shook off her hand. "The play's over. Can we sign the papers now?" Hearing my words, Liu Ryan looked at me, confused. "A play? Li Jiwen, what do you mean?" I chuckled softly. "You seem to enjoy acting out your little drama, so I joined in for a bit." A flicker of guilt crossed her face. She tried to argue, claiming she didn't know what I was talking about. I quietly stared at her, saying nothing. Before long, Liu Ryan turned her head away. Stop dragging this out. Sign the divorce papers. We'll finalize the divorce tomorrow, I said coldly. Just as Liu Ryan opened her mouth to say something, Cheng Xingwen came running up behind us. Senior, divorce him. I'll treat you well. He doesn't know how to cherish you. Before he could finish, Liu Ryan slapped him hard across the face. What nonsense are you spouting? How could I possibly divorce Jiwen? I only played along with your little games out of pity for you before. Cheng Xingwen's eyes widened in disbelief. Senior, are you serious about this? Liu Ryan didn't respond, instead turning away with an expression of guilt and discomfort. Tears welled up in Cheng Xingwen's eyes instantly. I watched the two of them, a mocking smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Liu Ryan grabbed my hand. Jiwen, I won't have any contact with him anymore. Don't misunderstand me, please. After all, he's still young, she pleaded. I placed the divorce agreement in her hand. Sign the papers. After that, whatever you do has nothing to do with me. With that, I turned and walked toward my car. Liu Ryan clung tightly to my hand, begging desperately. Jiwen, we've been together for so long. I harshly shook off her hand. Liu Ryan, I don't want to make this uglier than it already is. Sign it. You know I'm a lawyer. If I'm giving you this agreement, it means I already have evidence in hand. Her face turned pale. Before she could react, I got in the car and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw Cheng Xingwen embrace Liu Ryan from behind. She shoved his hands away, and the two of them began arguing heatedly. When I got home, I started packing my things. This house was purchased by Liu Ryan before our marriage. We both thought it wasn't necessary to move, so we've been living here ever since. Looking at the wedding photo on the wall, the scene of our wedding day flooded my mind. I had lost my parents when I was young. At the wedding, Liu Ryan held my hand and told her parents, from now on, he has a family of his own. She vowed to stay by my side for the rest of her life. I believed her, but the person who made that promise had quietly changed. Thinking about this, I glanced at the sunlight streaming through the window. I took down the wedding photo from the wall, carefully tore out the part of the photo that belonged to me. At that moment, it felt as though a chapter of my life had finally come to an end. A strange sense of relief settled in my heart. I decided to remove everything related to me from the house. When Liu Ryan pushed the door open, I was in the middle of tossing our matching cups into the trash. She immediately rushed over, trying to retrieve the cups from the bin. But when she saw what was inside, she froze. Lifting her head, she looked at me in disbelief. You threw all of this away? I glanced at her indifferently. If you want them, take them. With that, I grabbed my suitcase, ready to leave. Liu Ryan held onto my hand tightly. I already said I won't contact Cheng Xingwen anymore. What more do you want? I turned to look at her impatient expression and smirked. Let's not even mention that you've already accepted someone else's proposal. You've also slept with him, haven't you? My words made a flicker of panic cross Liu Ryan's face. What are you talking about? Before she could say more, I played the saved video on my phone in front of her. As the video played, her face turned increasingly pale. At last, her lips moved slightly, but she couldn't utter a word. I had no intention of wasting more words on her. Glancing at the time on my phone, I shook off her hand and walked away. Dragging my suitcase, I checked into a nearby hotel. Not long after, I received a message from Liu Ryan. She said she was willing to sign the divorce agreement. I arranged to meet her at the Civil Affairs Bureau. The next morning, I met Liu Ryan at the entrance of the bureau. I handed her the divorce agreement. Everything seemed ready to conclude. Liu Ryan said she was there to explain the video. The video was taken after Cheng Xingwen drugged me. I had no knowledge of it, she said. Honey, isn't there a saying that unawareness absolves guilt? Hearing this, I couldn't help but furrow my brows. Even at this point, Liu Ryan still chose to lie to me. Then what about that kiss in the hospital? I saw it with my own eyes. Were you drugged then too? Or were you hypnotized? By the time I finished speaking, my voice had unintentionally risen to a low growl. After all, years of feelings shattered by betrayal could not leave me as calm as I appeared. Liu Ryan froze, wanting to argue further but finding no words. Exhausted, I pinched the bridge of my nose. Sign it! I don't want to be entangled with you anymore. Liu Ryan's eyes turned red. She softly muttered, "I'm sorry," then took the divorce agreement and walked into the bureau ahead of me. The divorce process was quick. I looked down at the document in my hand, which mentioned a 30-day cooling off period. We'd have to finalize things in 30 days. Afterward, I turned to leave. But Liu Ryan grabbed my hand and said, "Jiwen, even though I've signed the agreement, I won't give up." I didn't respond, quickly walking away, leaving everything behind. I returned to the hotel, grabbed my luggage, and headed straight to the airport. As the plane took off, I posted on my social media, saying goodbye to the past. When the plane landed, I saw a group of friends I hadn't seen in ages waiting at the airport. Leading the group was Su Wenyu. The moment they saw me come out, they rushed toward me, smiling as they greeted, "You're finally back. Welcome back. We've already prepared a place for you." Hearing their voices, a warm feeling surged through my heart. Su Wenyu stood among them, her lips curled in a gentle smile as she watched me. I walked up to her, smiling as I said, "Hello, President Su. I've come to report for duty." Su Wenyu couldn't help but laugh. "Let's go. We've prepared a welcome party for you." They took me to our favorite hot pot restaurant from the past. After a few rounds of drinks, one of my friends teased, "Jiwen, now that you're back, how about giving Wenyu a chance? She's been waiting for you for years." It was no secret among friends that Su Wenyu liked me. I smiled faintly. "I'm not ready to think about that kind of thing yet. Right now, I'm focused on making money." Su Wenyu's face showed a flicker of disappointment, but she quickly joked, "Sounds like you just want to make money off me." The topic quickly shifted to something else. Later that night, Su Wenyu helped escort my half-drunken self back home, 2 years away. "And your tolerance has dropped." I chuckled softly. She didn't like it, so I drank very little. Liu Ryan couldn't stand the smell of alcohol. When I was with her, I barely touched a drop. Su Wenyu fell silent, her smile stiffening for a moment. Without saying a word, she poured me a glass of honey water. Looking at the honey water in her hands, I was a bit surprised. "Where did the honey come from?" Su Wenyu, slightly annoyed, replied, "I bought it." "Did you think honey would magically appear in the house?" Hearing her words, I suddenly remembered how she used to take care of all of us after we got drunk, and I always ended up with an extra glass of honey water compared to the others. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling a sudden pang of guilt. I'm sorry," I said softly. Before I could finish, Su Wenyu interrupted me. "Jiwen, you know I'm not looking for an apology. All these years, I've gotten used to it." Her voice carried a hint of resignation. "I have my limits, so let's just leave it at that." The next morning, I was woken up by a call from Liu Ryan. She asked, just like she used to, what I wanted for breakfast. I was stunned for a moment, then replied coldly, "We're divorced." Liu Ryan's tone instantly became sorrowful. "Can't we still have breakfast together? Can't we at least be friends?" "I'm not interested in being friends with you. Don't contact me unless it's something important." With that, I hung up and blocked her number. As I got up to wash up, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Su Wenyu, holding breakfast with a warm smile. "Jiwen, I made you breakfast." I blinked in surprise. "You went out of your way to bring me breakfast?" I asked. Su Wenyu pointed at the door across from mine and said she lived there. Her feelings for me had always been open and unapologetic. Despite knowing this, I didn't feel even the slightest awkwardness when spending time with her. After finishing breakfast, we were about to head out when my phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. When I answered, I realized it was Liu Ryan. Jiwen, I went to your law firm and they said you applied for a transfer. Where did you go? I hadn't expected her to go to the firm. That has nothing to do with you, I replied coldly. My words clearly hurt Liu Ryan. How does it have nothing to do with me? I want to see you. Jiwen, let's go. Su Wenyu's voice interrupted. Before Liu Ryan could finish speaking, she heard Wenyu's voice in the background. Immediately, she lowered her voice and hissed. Why do I hear Su Wenyu's voice? Jiwen, why are you with Su Wenyu? Her reaction didn't surprise me in the slightest. Wenyu had always been a sore spot for her. I didn't respond and directly hung up the phone. That day, Liu Ryan called countless times and sent numerous messages, all asking about Wenyu. I ignored every single one of them. When Wenyu came to pick me up for lunch, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. She raised an eyebrow and pointed at my phone, asking, "Can I answer it?" Without even looking, I said, "Go ahead if you want to." With a calm demeanor, Wenyu picked up my phone and answered with a simple, "Hello?" Liu Ryan's furious voice immediately came through the receiver. How dare you answer Jiwen's phone? What's your relationship with him? Hearing her shouting, the smile on Su Wenyu's lips widened even further. Why are you looking for him? Jiwen's busy. Wenyu's calm response made Liu Ryan even more hysterical. As Liu Ryan screamed into the phone, Wenyu hung up, leaving her in a state of utter frustration, clearly in a great mood after angering Liu Ryan. Wenyu said, "Let's go. Time for lunch. I'm in a good mood, so I'll treat you to sashimi." Looking at the table full of fresh sashimi, I could tell Wenyu wasn't kidding earlier. Eat up. Don't you love sashimi? As I ate, I noticed Wenyu struggling to hide her amusement. She didn't seem to mind, enjoying her food in silence. That afternoon, a colleague from the law firm messaged me, saying Liu Ryan had spent the whole day there. She asked everyone about my whereabouts, but no one disclosed the details of my transfer. In the end, Liu Ryan broke down and caused a scene at the firm, completely losing her usual composed demeanor. Watching the video of her outburst, I coldly turned off my phone screen and went back to work, just when I thought I'd never see Liu Ryan again. A week later after work, I saw her waiting outside the company. Frowning, I tried to walk around her, but Liu Ryan quickly approached me. "Jiwen, come home with me. Let's stop being like this." I was infuriated by her words. "I'm here to work," I said coldly. Liu Ryan didn't believe me. She continued speaking on her own. "You're just angry. I know you. Otherwise, why would you choose to work here?" Not wanting to argue further, I decided to walk past her and leave. But Liu Ryan, as if losing her mind, shouted loudly from behind me. Before I could take more than a few steps, she grabbed my hand tightly. "Jiwen, I beg you, please come back with me." Annoyed, I looked at her and said, "Liu Ryan, it's over between us. We're divorced." Liu Ryan refused to give up. Just as she was about to say more, Su Wenyu's voice came from behind. "Dr. Liu, you cheated and now want a second chance? Do you think you can have everything your way?" Liu Ryan's face turned even darker. With a scowl, she said, "Su Wenyu, you're relentless." But Wenyu wasn't fazed. She smiled cheerfully, giving Liu Ryan a playful glance. Then intentionally, she took my arm and said, "Jiwen, my mom knows you're back. She asked me to bring you home for dinner." I looked at Wenyu in surprise. She hadn't mentioned this to me before. Our families had been close for generations, but seeing the look she gave me, I agreed without hesitation. Liu Ryan choked back her tears and said, "Jiwen, you promised me before that you wouldn't associate with her. Back then because of her insecurity. About my relationship with Wenyu. I had voluntarily distanced myself from Wenyu. Naturally, I had also grown distant from that group of friends over time. But I hadn't expected that after coming back, I could reconnect with them as if nothing had changed. I looked coldly at Liu Ryan. I've forgotten everything from the past. Surely you don't still remember every word I said back then, do you? With that, I deliberately held onto Su Wenyu's hand and walked away. Liu Ryan's cries did nothing to slow my steps. We were already divorced. The past shouldn't stop me from moving toward my future. On the way, Wenyu explained the dinner at her house. I thought she was just joking. But when I actually stood in front of the Su family's door, I was caught off guard. From inside, Wenyu urged me to hurry up. I didn't bring anything, I muttered. It had been a long time since I last visited the Su family. Being brought here by Wenyu now, I felt inexplicably nervous. While I was still grappling with my emotions, Uncle and Aunt Su suddenly came out. The moment Aunt Su saw me, her eyes filled with tears. Jiwen, you finally come back. It's been so long since I last saw you. I quickly stepped forward, grasping her hands. After my parents passed away in an accident, Uncle and Aunt Su treated me like their own son. They even wanted me to move in with them. But at the time, my grandparents took me away from the city. It wasn't until I grew up that I managed to reconnect with them. When I saw the table filled with all my favorite dishes, a wave of warmth swept over me. My eyes started to sting slightly. Ever since my parents passed away, I'd rarely had the chance to eat these dishes. At first, it was because I was living under someone else's roof, afraid to make any requests. Later on, these dishes became sealed away in my memories, blinking away the soreness in my eyes. I finally began eating. As the meal went on, memories of the past kept flooding my mind. That night, lying on the bed, my thoughts unexpectedly drifted back to the first time I met Liu Ryan. It was the day I had just finished visiting my parents' graves. As usual, I was driving back to the law firm. While waiting at a red light, I saw Liu Ryan being harassed by a middle-aged man. He was accusing her of violating professional ethics. Feeling empathetic, I told the man about her innocence and suggested that Liu Ryan call the police. The man, furious that I had ruined his scheme, threw a drill in my direction in anger. I couldn't dodge in time and ended up getting hit. Liu Ryan anxiously checked my injury. After the situation was resolved, she told me that it had all started because of her, and asked for my contact information to thank me properly. 6 months later, we started dating. The next morning, when I gradually answered a call from Liu Ryan, I was momentarily caught off guard. Jiwen, I made your favorite pastries and am waiting at your office door. As I was about to drowsily agree, it suddenly hit me. Liu Ryan, there's no need for you to do these meaningless things anymore. When she saw me and when you arriving at work together, she grabbed my hand and questioned me. Li Jiwen, is this the real reason you insisted on divorcing me? Did you fall out of love with me? Is that it? Hearing her words, I smirked mockingly. Liu Ryan, if believing that helps you stop bothering me, then yes, that's the reason. Don't assume everyone is like you. Someone who would betray their partner. You know very well what you've done, don't you? So how do you still have the audacity to cling to me? Are you that shameless? Or do you think I can stomach the disgust and forgive you? With every question I threw at her, Liu Ryan's face grew paler. Her eyes reddened as she looked at me and asked, Jiwen, did you just call me disgusting? Without mercy, I nodded. I told her bluntly not to bother me anymore. No matter who I'm with in the future, there will never be any chance for us. After saying this, I turned to Wenyu and asked her to make sure security keeps irrelevant people from approaching the company in the future. I thought my harsh words this time would finally make Liu Ryan give up and leave. But the next morning, I was woken up by a knock on the door. Glancing at the time, I assumed Wenyu had come early today. Ah, you. Why are you here so early today? My words stopped abruptly when I opened the door to see Liu Ryan's face. What are you doing here? Liu Ryan stood there, acting as if nothing had happened. She told me she had followed me home the previous night. This is the porridge you've always liked. I made it early this morning. Will you try it? Jiwon, please, can you give me another chance? I made a mistake in a moment of weakness. It won't happen again. I frowned but didn't respond immediately. Just then, Wenyu's door opened. Leaning against the doorframe in her pajamas, she smiled and said, Jiwon actually doesn't like porridge. Didn't you know that? The smile on Liu Ryan's face froze instantly. She stared at me blankly and asked, is what Wenyu said true? I nodded coldly, saying, yes. Liu Ryan refused to believe it. That's impossible, she said. You told me you loved it before. Before I could reply, Liu Ryan's phone rang. From the other end of the line, an anxious voice came through clearly. Dr. Liu, you're trending online. You need to check it right away. Frowning, Liu Ryan asked nervously, what kind of trending topic? Someone uploaded your photos in bed to the internet. The director wants you back at the hospital immediately. Liu Ryan's face turned pale, and after a panicked glance at me, she left in a hurry. I took out my phone and saw the notification pop up. Beautiful doctor caught cheating. I swiped the message away and went to freshen up. That night, a video of Liu Ryan arguing with Chung Xingwen at the hospital also went viral. In the video, Chung Xingwen's face was twisted in anger. He held a knife against his wrist, threatening. He screamed at Liu Ryan, Senior, you promised we'd be together. I've prepared everything at home. How can you go back on your word now? I can't live without you. If you won't be with me, I'll end it all. Liu Ryan coldly stared at him, her voice emotionless as she said, I could never be with you. The person I love has never been you. Hearing this, Chung Xingwen's expression turned maniacal. He began cutting his hand with the knife over and over. After this incident went viral, Liu Ryan was dismissed from the hospital. Chung Xingwen, due to excessive blood loss and oxygen deprivation to his brain, ended up in a vegetative state. When Chung Xingwen's parents learned of the incident, they sued Liu Ryan in court, demanding compensation. The next time I saw Liu Ryan was when the divorce cooling-off period ended. She looked haggard, her eyes sunken with dark circles, completely unlike her once confident self. Let's go in, I said, before walking into the Civil Affairs Bureau ahead of her. After receiving the divorce certificate, she looked at me with teary eyes and said, I'm sorry. I heard her court case with the Chang family was set to begin the next day. But I wasn't interested in staying to listen. I got into the car where Su Wenyu had been waiting. Congratulations on your newfound freedom, she said. I took the bouquet from her hands. Let's go. They're still waiting for us. A year later, Wenyu and I registered our marriage. Her parents couldn't hide their joy. We decided not to hold a wedding ceremony. The day after I posted our marriage certificate on social media, I received an anonymous text message. Wish you happiness. I deleted the message without a second thought, then continued cuddling with Wenyu, watching our movie. From now on, my days will continue to be filled with happiness. The end.